Well, a lot happening in our country as it relates to this next story. CBS News 24/7 with an eye to court battles over a pro-Palestinian activist facing deportation out of the United States. We are talking about Mahmoud Khalil. So let's learn a little bit more about him. He's a legal U.S. resident. He has a green card. He protested against Israel's war in Gaza at Columbia University. Of course, we know Columbia University getting a strong finger wagging and a withdrawal of some big-time dollars in recent days. Immigration agents arrested Khalil over the weekend, shipped him off to a detention center in Louisiana. Columbia grad. Now his supporters and legal advocates are rallying for his release. Well, fast forward to today, and this is the scene from the sky. The arrest sparking demonstrations in some parts of our country, not the least of which right outside the courtroom. The White House says Khalil's arrest is the first of many. And that sent protesters who say his speech should be protected as a legal resident of the United States under green card status. Well, they say they're going to protest that. They say he should be protected, should not be deported. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security, we are understanding, says they will detain more people connected with last year's protests. All right, it's my understanding that we have an opportunity now to hear a news conference on this very issue.
Louisiana is a day too long. We and he fully intend to vindicate not just his First Amendment rights, but those of all Americans, frankly, and all lawful permanent residents, and anybody who wants to speak out. It simply cannot be the case that you can be disappeared at night off the streets of New York City simply because the current U.S. government, the current administration at the White House dislikes what you have to say. That is, not just un-American, it's also unacceptable. And so Mr. Khalil and we will fight as hard as we need to in court to bring him home to New York City as soon as possible. And that's one of the motions that is now pending before this court. It is a motion to bring him back home and to free him so that he can fight this removal case. So we won't be answering questions right now, but look, this.
No questions yet.
Okay, so I'll just say this and I'll step back. It is absolutely unprecedented. The grounds that are being cited by the government for purportedly claiming to revoke his green card and putting him in removal proceedings. This is a person who is a lawful permanent resident. This is a U.S. person. Those grounds are vague. They are rarely used, and essentially they are a form of punishment and retaliation for the exercise of free speech. We think it won't fly in federal court. We think it won't fly in immigration court, and it certainly should not fly in the court of public opinion.
Why not raise that today?
All right. Thank you, Ramzi.
Hi.
Next, I'd like to introduce Bahid Azmi, the legal director of the Center of Constitutional Rights, also a member of Mahmoud's legal team.
Bahir Azmi, B-A-H-E-R, A-Z-M-Y, from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Mr. Khalil's detention has nothing to do with security. It is only about repression. United States government has taken the position that it can arrest, detain, and seek to deport a lawful permanent resident exclusively because of his peaceful, constitutionally protected activism. In this case, activism in support of Palestinian human rights and an end to the genocide in Gaza. The government takes the position that because the Secretary of State finds his dissent unacceptable or contrary to U.S. foreign policy, he can be deported. As Ramzi suggested, it's largely unprecedented, save for ugly historical precedents, including the Red Scare and McCarthyism. That's what we're talking about. We're also talking about a period of repression that the Center for Constitutional Rights knows well, following 9/11, when we were in the courts trying to get people out of secret detention. One thing that's different now is the legal infrastructure is so much stronger, and everyone out here on the streets knows that we cannot hide in the face of this amount of repression. We will be fighting in the courts and fighting in the streets to bring Mahmoud home and prevent this level of repression from spreading to many others, as the administration has threatened to do.
Why not argue the merits in court today, sir? The judge invited repeatedly.
Thank you, Bahid. Now we'll hear from Professor Joseph Howley, an associate professor at Columbia University.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Howley, Howley, and I'm an associate professor of classics at Columbia University. The last time I spoke at a press conference was April 18th. That day, police officers in crowd control gear entered our campus for the first time in decades and carried off dozens of students who were peacefully and quietly encamped on one of the enclosed lawns in front of our library, threatening no one. As I watched this unfold in horror, I was asked to speak at an emergency press conference alongside Mahmoud, who had just been asked to negotiate on behalf of the encampment. It is always dangerous to speak in public for Palestinian rights, safety, and freedom with your face uncovered and your name declared. You can be sure you will be harassed, doxxed, terrorized. People will try to get you fired from your job. For speaking here, I will receive a new round of death threats, slander, complaints to my employer. When I step down from here, I will publish these remarks to protect me from the inevitable attempts to misrepresent my words. And Mahmoud, as a student negotiator, took these same risks and many more. Mahmoud is a man of decency, honor, and kindness. He has distinguished himself in his work as an advocate and negotiator, as someone committed to peaceful resolution of difficult situations. He is a consummate diplomat in his disposition and his character. What the Trump government is doing to Mahmoud is obscene. It is unreasonable, intolerable, unconstitutional. So why do they think they can get away with it? The Trump administration is betting that Americans will happily look the other way as one more Palestinian is victimized here on American soil. They are betting that when you hear Mahmoud's name or the word Palestinian, the parts of you that make you a thinking and rational and caring person will switch off, and you will believe the worst about him, and you will turn a blind eye to these grave violations of his rights. And after what I've seen over the last year and a half, I'm not sure they're wrong. Anti-Palestinian groups have spent all year casually leveling the most dangerous accusations on the flimsiest grounds, and members of our own community have repeated them. Don't like seeing a kafia? Call them a terrorist and call the cops. Don't like their views? Call them anti-Semitic and get them expelled. Don't like that your Jewish colleague has the chutzpah?
CBS News 24/7 outside the courtroom where those arguments about Mr. Mahmoud Khalil played out. And now we have an opportunity to talk to somebody who was on the inside of that courtroom. Let's bring it over now to CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman outside that Manhattan courthouse. You were just in the courtroom. Obviously, the perspectives we just heard were very much in favor of Mr. Khalil. What can you tell us about those arguments that happened in court today?
So, Reed, this really wasn't a hearing where we were hearing about the merits of this case. And it's actually interesting because the judge expressed surprise about that there was no discussion about the merits or about bail for Khalil. So the real things that they were discussing are, there's a threshold issue of the jurisdiction. Mahmoud Khalil is currently at a detention center in Louisiana. He was arrested in New York. In between, he was brought to New Jersey. And what the government says is that the Southern District of New York is not the proper forum for this to be taking place. Khalil's attorneys have asked for him to be returned to the city. So that's going to be a key thing that needs to be decided here. Another thing that came up that was interesting is that Khalil's attorneys talked about the fact that they have not had proper access to their client since he was brought to this detention center in Louisiana. They said they have not yet had an attorney-client privilege call with him. Only one call that was not privileged that was cut off.
All right, so as an attorney, you're not only one of our correspondents, but you are also an attorney, which is such an ace in the hole for us. I have to ask you this question. You heard the reporters asking the man whose voice we can hear on that loudspeaker behind you, why did you not argue the merits of the case? You raised that as well. Is this just procedural where they have to first address jurisdiction questions before they can get into the pro and con of all of this?
But we are also here because what happens
Not
to
necessarily,
Mahmoud
Reed,
could
because
happen
the
to
judge
any of us.
absolutely seemed
If they
open
can
to
strip the
discussing
green
the
cards
merits
of a
in
lawful
court
permanent
today.
resident, they
But
can do
what
whatever
Khalil's
they want
attorney
to a
said is
citizen.
that they're planning
If you're waiting
to
for
submit
permission
an
to
amended
think of this as a
habeas
crisis,
petition
here it is.
trying to get
What has
his
been done to
release.
Mahmoud goes
And
far
I think
beyond whether or not
also
you
they
agree
mentioned
with the
because they
cause
hadn't
of
had any of
Palestinian
these
liberation. Where
attorney-client
exactly
privilege
are
calls
we in the
with
poem
Khalil
that
yet.
begins when
They
they
seemed
came for the
reticent to
communists, I
make
did not
any
speak
sort
out.
of
Well,
merits arguments
they've
in
already
court
come for
yet.
the asylum
And another thing that the
seekers.
judge
They've
said
come for the
today is
migrant families.
Khalil's attorneys
Now
were
they've come
asking
for
for
Mahmoud Khalil.
access
It's
to
not
their
a very
client.
long
Apparently,
poem.
when they were trying
So
to
how far
schedule
down
an
the list do you
attorney-client
think you
privilege
are?
call, the earliest
I've been
one they could
proud
get
to
was on
stand
March
as a Jew
20th.
beside
So
Mahmoud Khalil
the judge
and
has
call for
now
free and
ordered
just
that
and
they are
peaceful
given that
Israel
access.
Palestine.
They're supposed to
It is
have
my honor now
one
to stand
attorney-client
before you
privilege
and
call
call on
with
what
Khalil
remains of the
today
United
and
States
another one
government to do the
tomorrow,
right
so
thing
that they
and
can
free Mahmoud
accurately
Khalil.
put together
Thank
this
you.
amended petition.
All right, thank you so much for helping us navigate this. Obviously, a lot of energy there behind you on this issue. Katrina Kaufman, great to have you with us today.